Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
The tranquil, soothing, natural sound of flowing water. Listening to it has been shown to lower your heart rate and blood pressure and generally relax your whole body. Combining the magical sound of cascading water with the beauty of plants, Hydria Life will now enable you to use those same health and well-being effects at home or in the garden. Get 10% off their rechargeable Hydria fountain at hydrialife.com. All you need to do is quote the code PLANT24 when ordering.
Hi everyone, it's Ellen Mary here. Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. I hope you are going to enjoy this week's episode because it's actually a follow-on episode from a solo interview that I done with Giulio Giorgi a few weeks back. And Giulio is the designer of an RHS Chelsea show garden for 2024 in the sanctuary category. He is designing the World Child Cancer's Nurturing Garden. So if you're interested in learning about that, it was a lovely interview. He was absolutely wonderful. Just go back a few weeks in the library and you will find that interview. But that was so good. I was so excited to find out a little bit more about what's going on at Chelsea 2024. So today's interview is with Ula Maria, and I have interviewed her especially for you to find out more about an immersive forest bathing experience for Muscular Dystrophy UK patients, their families, clinicians and the wider community that Ula has designed for Chelsea. It's called the Muscular Dystrophy UK Forest Bathing Garden. And if you know me and follow me on social media, you will know I'm all about the trees. So this is a really exciting garden. I can't wait to see it at the show as well. Ula was actually awarded the RHS Young Designer of the Year in 2017, and she has a London landscape studio where she focuses on creating like emotive garden spaces. So this is a really lovely interview. Learn more about the garden, learn more about Eula's background and what it takes to design a garden. And RHS Chelsea this year is absolutely lovely. So sit back, put your feet up and enjoy. Okay, welcome to the podcast, Ula. It's so awesome to have you here. I just have to say, I always like to say for listeners to give an idea of, so they can visualize like where you're sitting. And you've got a really beautiful picture just behind you and a bonsai tree I can see. And then some flowers. Are they dried flowers? I'm not sure, in a vase at the side. And so I always like for people to, listeners to try and visualize where you actually are. But it looks very serene, and I can definitely tell you like plants. So
that's good. Hi, and really nice to be here and have a chat with you.
You're so welcome, and I was really happy, to see what you're doing at Chelsea. So I'm really looking forward to just finding out a little bit more about you. How you got into landscape design, and then talking about the RHS Chelsea garden that you are designing, which is completely amazing. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. Like, what's your background? Have you always enjoyed being around plants and design, or is it something that came a bit later?
So I always feel like this, because this question comes up a lot, and I feel like probably 90% of people who are now sort of garden designers usually have some sort of like a long-rooted connection to gardens, and I'm no exception. So I am originally from Lithuania, and I grew up in the countryside, really sort of amazing idyllic location with sort of meadows and forest and a river, and used to sort of like run through the meadows to go for a swim, and it just it's sort of lovely. And my grandparents and my great grandparents were super into gardens. So my great grandparents were someone who had a tulip nursery and grew tulips. And then my grandma was super into lilies, and we always had a garden. So I used to just spend a lot of time sort of in gardens and nature. My dad is a biologist. That's what he sort of studied for. So everything I feel like from early childhood has been somehow connected to nature and gardens. So it sort of was never like a conscious choice that I made to be a garden designer initially. I sort of went on a bit of a journey of how it came about. I always wanted to be an architect. And then I discovered a profession called landscape architecture. So that's why I studied at university, which, is sort of quite cool. And I just discovered that quite sort of by accident by looking at different architecture courses, and that's how that sort of started.
So basically, landscape, nature, plants is running through your veins. All of your family have enjoyed being outside, and it sounds like idyllic. Also, your childhood being able to run through meadows to go swimming. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Sounds really very beautiful. So after you've done your landscape architecture training, have you obviously you're here to talk about the RHS Chelsea Show Garden. What happened next after you trained? Like, have you designed lots of gardens before, at home, and also show gardens? What's the background there?
So when I finished my course at university, I sort of worked a few years for big landscape architecture practices, working on more sort of commercial sites and big schemes. And then I think one of my friends sent me an email which from RHS that basically announced the competition for the Young Designer of the Year competition. And they just said like, I think you should do this. And I sort of, I knew of the RHS, but I've never kind of like looked whether they do any sort of competitions like this, and never imagined sort of taking part in one. So this was in 2017 is when I sort of decided, I'll give it a go. And so I put in an application, and that sort of got selected to be one of the 3 designers to do a garden at Tatton Flower Show, which was really exciting. So I did that, and then that was my very first show garden. And then sort of I did other ones as a sort of as a result, getting involved with the RHS and having that experience. Yeah.
I love that. So you started off with the Young Designer of the Year kind of gardens. And what would you kind of recommend to anyone who's now thinking about perhaps designing a garden as a young designer? Do you have any kind of recommendations or advice for them?
I feel like, to be honest, when I did my first show garden, in a way, I probably felt the most free at that time, because I didn't have sort of like any sort of deep thoughts about rules or, what it should be, or like too much advice. So in a way, I think it's really nice that you just go into and you just do exactly what you like. And I guess another thing about doing the competition, you sort of are your own client in a way. So you can really go wild and do what you really want to do, which I think is great. Yeah.
So go wild is the advice. Go wild, do whatever you want to do. So that's awesome. So you've designed the Muscular Dystrophy UK Forest Bathing Garden for RHS Chelsea this year, and this was like highlighted to me because any of my followers will know that I'm a tree hugger, forest bather, and it's awesome to see this aspect of nature within such a huge stage, which is the Chelsea Flower Show. I know that forest bathing has become a bit more recognised over the last few years, but actually it's an age-old tradition, isn't it? And it's just incredibly good for health. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the garden. Where do we even start? Like, where did this come about? Why muscular dystrophy? And tell us all about the garden, because I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, I feel like it's been such a long journey already. So I sort of looked back to my emails and saw that I think the very first time Muscular Dystrophy UK reached out to me was about 2 years ago, or just over 2 years ago. So it's been 2 years in planning and working with them, which has been just such an amazing experience. And really was just through mutual connections that they've sort of decided to get in touch with me. And I think at the time, I remember when I saw the email, I just thought, oh my gosh, because I was just so busy and overwhelmed with all the other projects and work. And then I just thought, I must go and meet them and talk to them, because I looked at the website and the work that they do is just incredible, the amount of people they help. So I thought I must go and talk to them just to see whether there's any sort of future potential projects or collaborations. So I thought I'll just go in for a chat. And then obviously we had a chat and I was like, oh my God, I've got to get involved and we've got to work on this garden together. So Muscular Dystrophy UK charity, they help more than 110,000 people who live with one of 60 muscle wasting conditions. So the work that they do is just so meaningful, and I just think it's so amazing to be able to showcase a garden and showcase a bit what they do. So it's just a great opportunity, and that's sort of like how it came about initially.
It's such a huge stage, isn't it, for a charity to get seen on? So, it is such an important show for that reason. Why forest bathing, though? How did that come about into the design?
So the inspiration for the garden, initially I was sort of talking to the UK community, and I got really inspired by a guy called Martin, and he's been diagnosed in his 20s. He's in his 50s now, and he was telling me how when he got his diagnosis, he left the hospital facilities, and there was nowhere really to go outside in that sort of environment. So he just ended up going back to his car and contemplating how his life will change. And that's quite just quite a difficult to even think about, to think that someone who's going through such a tough time, then you sort of going back to your car and sitting and contemplating such big things. And I thought it would be really great then to think how we could showcase that creating a really high quality environment outside of hospitals or medical facilities could be a way of just providing a sheltered, a safe space for people to go outside and process their thoughts, reconnect with sort of, what they're going through and themselves and nature. And then I've heard about forest bathing over the years, but I never looked into it in great sort of detail. And then I just sort of remembered it for this and started looking into it more and how great it is and how sort of it can help people going through a really difficult, it can obviously help anyone, but I think especially where one might find themselves in a really sort of tricky situations and being in these very sterile medical environments, to kind of provide a juxtaposition for that and create something really magical and immersive that kind of engages your senses. And obviously it has so many great mental sort of well-being benefits as well as physical. So that's sort of how I started and trying to connect and look into forest bathing as a theme for the garden.
I always feel like if you go into a forest with like intention to forest bathe, it's like you're getting a big hug, and it does feel it feels safe. Like, it's sometimes inexplainable how it makes you feel, but when you just walk into the trees, it's like they're there and they're listening and they're full of wisdom and you're safe in amongst them and you can just engage, like you mentioned, all of your senses. It's just a wonderful environment to be in. And I am genuinely so happy that people are recognizing the benefits of being outside, being immersed in nature and forest bathing especially. I'd love to know a little bit more about the design of the garden. Can you tell us, I don't know how much you're allowed to tell us or if it's a surprise or not, but can you tell us a little bit about how the garden is designed, what visitors can expect when they come to see it?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about one thing within this garden, and that's trees. So we've got more than 50 trees in the garden, which I don't know if anyone's done that at Chelsea before, but I think it might be the first time that we've got so many trees in one garden. Because I thought if we're doing a forest bathing garden, then we've got to go big and really sort of, just really have as many trees as possible.
I love this. Just so you know, like I'm going to come and I'm going to just sit on your garden the whole time and not go anywhere else.
Yeah, I actually think it's going to be such a nice space because you can just go in and you're going to be surrounded by trees and the canopies, and it's just going to be quite sort of quiet in that sense, trying to escape the rest of the Chelsea and the main avenue. But so I'm really excited about that. And I'm kind of drawing inspiration from birch groves. So I don't know if you've ever seen, but I was just walking by Tate Modern, and outside Tate Modern, they've got like loads of these birch trees planted really closely together. And I always really loved that. And I thought, actually, as a sort of inspiration, that's great. And also from back home in Lithuania, I do remember sort of walking in birch forests, and that kind of brings those memories into it as well. So that's kind of the key theme behind the trees. And I wanted to have lots of trees with leaves that provide dappled shade, which I think birch is sort of really great for that. And then the hard landscaping is quite simple in its sort of structure in a way, because we wanted to make the garden as accessible as possible. Because when you do have muscular dystrophy, obviously your muscles weaken over time, and movement sometimes, depending on what stage sort of you're at, can become difficult. So just making it as accessible as possible was a really big thing within the garden. And then I'm using a lot of reclaimed materials. So we've got these clay pavers that are over 100 or 120 years old, that I just found in this yard, sort of looking for reclaimed materials. And then also we're using reclaimed Yorkstone and creasing tiles and just everything you can sort of think of. And then I guess one of the key features within the garden, we've got flint wall. So the flint wall, the way or the reason why I chose that, I was looking at lots of images of muscle cells, just to try and understand what happens when muscles get affected by muscular dystrophy. And when looking at a lot of images, there were these patterns that started to appear that I thought they are quite beautiful as patterns. And they really reminded me of flint walls because they've got the same sort of shapes within them. And I thought it would be great to then have a flint wall. So then if we want to explain more about what happens during sort of when someone has muscular dystrophy, we could use the wall as a tool instead of doing something quite literal. It's more sort of subtle in that sense.
That sounds absolutely incredible, and it's so creative. To look at the muscle cells and then try to relate that back to a landscape design. That's really incredible. I have to just ask you, on the press release for this garden, it says there'll be a feature wall due to its beautiful texture and form that's reminiscent of muscle cells, and a large bungarouche style wall. What is a bungarouche wall?
It's quite funny, isn't it? I basically, because everyone sort of asked me, and it's a word that I discovered myself. And we sort of were, one time we took a little trip down to Margate, rented some bikes out, and then we were cycling to Broadstairs. It's a really nice sort of coastal cycling route. And we were passing quite a few of the flint walls. And then we were passing these other walls, and they just had lots of different types of materials in them. And I thought, they look quite sort of strange, but also quite beautiful. And they really just had every single material that you think whoever was building the wall had on site. So from creasing tiles to pavers to bricks, some flint. I think there were some sort of shells and just really sort of anything and everything they could probably find. And then I thought this must be some sort of a style, or it's got to have a name. And I just started researching that online and found that it's called bungarouche. So I guess it's basically in the older days, people just used to not want to waste materials and do some things as cheaply as possible. So they would just basically look at everything they've got on site and see what they can make from it, which I think is great because it's just such a sustainable way of doing things. But obviously ours, we will just try to do in a way that it looks really beautiful and carefully thought out rather than just bunged together.
I love it. The word is an awesome word. You learn something new every day, don't you? And now everyone knows what a bungarouche style wall is. I think that's absolutely epic. I can't wait to see yours. Bungarouche wall. Talking of no waste, it's obviously really important that the garden is used after Chelsea and it isn't just all broken down and thrown away, in a skip. So what's happening to the garden once you're finished at the end of the show?
So the garden is going to IDRM, which is Institute of Developmental and Regenerative Medicine in Oxford. Mouthful. I always feel I'm gonna trip on that one. But it's a building where a lot of research for muscular dystrophy UK happens, and a lot of other different sort of medical conditions. And also some people go to get diagnosed there. And the building it's quite interesting that the building was sponsored by someone from Japan. So we thought, oh, that's quite like a nice link that we're doing a Shinrin Yoku inspired garden that sort of comes from Japan. And then, there's a donor who sort of sponsored the building who is from Japan. And so it seemed like just the perfect site for it. So it's going there, and we're going to replant all of the trees and plants, and just really try to enrich what's there at the moment. And hopefully it will be a really lovely space.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important, isn't it, to reuse it and give back and for people being around trees whilst they're in recovery, or like you said before, have anything very, it being in a medical environment. There was some research recently that was saying that patients who were recovering, if they could see green space, they recovered quicker than those that didn't or couldn't see anything.
I actually read about this years and years ago when I was still at university doing my thesis. And I can't remember the name of who's done the research or the studies, but it was sort of like if you just have a window and you're lying in bed and you're looking through a window and you'll see a tree outside of the window, you will heal, sort of become better much faster, which is, it's incredible.
It's so amazing. So just think that there will be people who will be able to sit or walk or be pushed or wheelchair through those trees that you're planting there. And hopefully that's going to give them a sense of recovery, or at least peace and time out in a nice space. And lastly, before we finish up, the garden is sponsored by Project Giving Back, isn't it? Can you tell us a little about those?
Yeah, that's the most amazing people who work for Project Giving Back, and there are two people who are anonymous or wish to remain anonymous, but they sponsor all of these amazing gardens at Chelsea. And really the main aim is to put designers with charities together and just to create these gardens highlighting and showcasing what charities do by creating these sort of gardens for them. And then the relocation is obviously just important as well. So amazing sponsor. So super happy to be working with them.
So anyone listening, that's Project Giving Back. If you haven't already heard of them, you can find them online at Project Giving Back, and also their social media as well. So they do lots of socials around the gardens and the designers and the charities that are involved in the show. So you can go check them out. Where can listeners find out more about you and your and what you're doing as well online?
I guess the best is probably my Instagram, which is Ula Maria Studio. That's where I try and sort of put as much information as I can. And also Muscular Dystrophy UK Instagram and website. They're going to do a lot of coverage over the upcoming weeks about the garden and our journey. That's probably the two main channels.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'm quite sure that you are busy as we ramp up to Chelsea. And I'm sure in those weeks running up to it, you might be pulling your hair out, but it's all going to be absolutely worth it in the end. I hope you enjoy the experience of being at Chelsea. And for anyone listening, if you're going to the show, please stop by and look at the Muscular Dystrophy UK Forest Bathing Garden. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, Ula. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. And I look forward to coming and having a little browse around the garden at Chelsea.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you there.
Thank you very much. The tranquil, soothing, natural sound of flowing water. Listening to it has been shown to lower your heart rate and blood pressure and gently relax your whole body. Combining the magical sound of cascading water with the beauty of plants, Hydria Life now enable you to enjoy these same health and well-being benefits at home or in the garden. Get 10% off their rechargeable Hydria fountain at hydrialife.com when you quote code PLANT24 on ordering. That's PLANT24 on ordering.
The music for the Plant-Based podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.